Hello, everyone. This is I Love Myself Fix presented. Would you like to do it again?
No, you
No?
could edit it
I
later,
guess,
dude.
yeah.
All right, now that's fine. We'll stop it.
No,
No, was
don't press it, don't press it.
all right, fine.
We're just going to have to wait. I already messed it up.
I love editing. Editing is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it is. So a hairstyle. All right, what's up, bro? What's
All
up?
right,
And I'm like, what? Everybody's like, hair.
And all this white space isn't very forgiving.
I know. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead, Oscar. I'll distract you.
What are we waiting for?
A space, so I can say something.
Oh, ooh, it's tight up in here.
Okay.
I Love Myself Fix presents Coming Into Grace, a new podcast hosted by mother and son duo at Courtney's Fix and at Asha's Fix. And today we're joined by Agnes Hall. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. It's been a overall good Juneteenth.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's been a beautiful day.
I'm leaning you in just so you're so handsome. All right.
So I was wondering if you'd share with our listeners what it is that you do for your daytime job, or what is your occupation?
Yeah, so I'm in the retail profession right now. I'm in corporate talent acquisition, and I lead a team that does all the talent attraction for all of our corporate roles and hourly roles across the country. So I work at Macy's Inc. I didn't say that. And so that is for stores, for our corporate executives, and for our supply chain warehouse centers. So I run about a $5 million budget for the year, and we really focus on attracting the best talent to come and work for me.
Really cool.
That is really
That is
cool,
really
right?
cool.
I didn't know. I never know.
It's hard to explain, but it's actually something very simple, but not many people understand it.
Well, you got it down pat. What it said to me was, I was like, I might need to go get a job from Agnes.
There you go. We're always hiring.
How did you?
Even now, believe it or not.
Oh my God.
How did you get into this line of work?
You know, I've been in retail for a long time. So I started my career in retail after business school. And, you know, by default, really, did I get into talent acquisition and to like the HR function, because I spent many years as a buyer and as a merchandise planner with Macy's, and moved into HR, I want to say almost 10 years ago, and really got tapped on the shoulder to join our learning and development, our training group. And then from there, got tapped on the shoulder again to get to the role that I'm in today. So it was nothing that I had necessarily trained or planned for, but just had the opportunity within the company to branch out into HR.
Very cool. Very cool. I was trying to follow as much as possible, but no, I got it at the end.
Okay.
This is hilarious.
And what was your father's name?
His name?
Yes.
So that's a loaded question. So his name was actually Lamond Godwin, Lamond Godwin. And however, that was the name that he was known by. That was actually, Lamond was actually his middle name, and his first name was Irving, although no one ever called him Irving. At times he used to start out, I think, going by like Lamond Godwin, and then he just dropped the I altogether, and he was Lamond.
Wow.
It's funny when you Google him, no eyes show up.
I know. I think that probably happened pre-Google times. I don't know. But yeah, in any event.
Yeah. He made sure that wasn't anywhere near that Godwin, because I didn't know.
Yep, for sure.
Anything? So one of the things that I would love to, so there are, that was dumb. I'm about to ask a dumb question that I already know. So when you think about being a daughter that was loved, what is the most cherished element of that you can think about, you know?
That's a great question. You know, I mean, I think when I think about the relationship with my father and how safe I felt, how I think not only loved but like cherished I felt. Like I was something that was special like no other, and he would always be there to protect me from whatever he could, almost in like a superhuman kind of way, especially when I was a little girl, but always feeling protected, I would say.
And then when you think about your relationship with your mother, and then you think about relationship with your father. I mean, and you were close to both of them, you know, that's our running joke that we always feel like our lives are weird.
Yeah.
When you think about how your father, did your father, I know I'm going kind of a weird way, was your father's relationship with your mother once you were older distinctly different than his relationship with you? I know that's a strange question, but.
You know, it was definitely different. I mean, I think that, you know, he was a protector of all, right? So, I mean, there's always, I think, was some element of protection to everyone that he loved, whether it be, you know, my mom and their, you know, marriage, and their relationship, whether it be even his, you know, nieces and nephews, you know, our nuclear family or what have you. But I think that he was always a little overprotective of us both in different ways. And, you know, as you know, Courtney, my mom was legally blind, right? So there was a special kind of, I think, level of protection that he wanted her to have to make sure she would be okay, right? And also because she was fiercely independent, even though she was legally blind, she wanted to do things on her own. She didn't want to have people do things for her, right? And so that made her that much more probably vulnerable in his eyes. And so he was always almost in like a, you know, he was worried, I think, about her protection and that she would be okay. I think the protection for me was more about, he knew I would be okay. He knew I was a strong person. He knew I could do for myself, but the protection was more around how I showed up, how I would be received, what people would think about me, what I projected about myself as an extension maybe of him or of our family or that type of thing. So yeah, I think it was definitely similar but very different, if that makes any sense.
It makes perfect sense. And I ask that only because of those similarities. I probably wouldn't ask that question, but to maybe three, you know, people on this earth. But when I think about my father and I's relationship versus my mother and I's relationship, and however close we were, one of the things that my father would always say was, you know, he's like, that's my girlfriend, you know. They had already been married for 40 years, but he was like, that's my girl. And for him, there was, in that very similar way, he protected her in a way in which he was so proud of her being his wife, but still, you know, sort of blocking around her. She was taller than him. She was faster than him.
Right.
but it was always this thing. And then with me, he was almost like, it was a very similar protection, but then he was in front in a different way. Then he would sort of lean in, like she'll take you out. But almost like it was the heavy in a very different way. But that I was always to know that she was the princess, that she was a different, or she, the queen, but she was definitely his queen, and he kept that word on his mouth till he died. Like, this is my girlfriend. It was like, oh, nobody's messing with your girlfriend today.
We're not going to do that, right. yeah, for sure.
Would you share with us just a little bit about where your father came from and some of his accomplishments?
Yeah, I'd love to. So my dad grew up in Mobile, Alabama, which is, basically the very kind of southernmost tip of the state of Alabama, and it's in, as you know, the Gulf, right? So it's very close to Biloxi, Mississippi, and New Orleans, and there's kind of this Gulf Coast connection. And he also grew up in a neighborhood in Mobile they call it down the bay, which means that you are literally down at the end of the bay on the water. And growing up there, he was born in 1942, so, 40s and 50s, in the segregated South was very different. And I've heard stories about, various things that happened to him at that time. But the one thing that he always talked about was just the closeness of his family. My grandmother is Agnes, so I'm named after her. And she was a musician. She played the piano. They always had musicians around the house because of her love of music, because of his love of music. And he also talked about that he lost his dad when he was very young. I want to say he was in his teens, maybe 13 or 14, when he lost his dad. So I never had the chance to meet him. I've seen pictures, and he looks exactly like him, like hands down, exactly like his dad. It's really interesting. And my dad was also the youngest of three. So he was 13 years younger than his oldest sister. And they were pretty close together in age. So he grew up almost kind of as an only child, and also being the only boy. He was adored by everyone in the family. And, they still talk about that to this day. I still have a cousin, actually. We call her Tutu, and I've always called her Aunt Tutu, but technically she's my cousin. And she still talks about, to this day, how spoiled he was and how he got to do what he wanted to do and all of this. And his nickname, he had several nicknames, which, as you can, imagine in the South, there are always lots of nicknames, right? So his had a couple. One was Peter, which I don't know why, because that's just a regular name, but they called him Peter. One was Bubba, which was a common, Southern name. And then, let's see, what was another one? I don't know. I'll think of another one later. But anyway, so if you think about that, his upbringing there, he went to Catholic school. And then from there, when he left Alabama, he went to Clark in Atlanta for college and got a master's degree at University of Illinois in Champaign in economics, I believe. And so, did you want me to talk about his career or just
a little bit?
Kind of
if you
a little bit. Yeah, I can just do like a quick summary. So, but basically, he started out in economics and working on research for on the poor in the rural South. And so he traveled around to different states, doing research to write a book for that. Which is where he met my mom when he was in Kentucky, because my mom is from Lexington, Kentucky, and so that's how they met. And he would always joke and say, like, this must be the reason why I came to Kentucky, because why else would I be in Kentucky? So he would be like, no, but that's the only reason I got here is because of you. So So anyway, so he did that and spent some time in the government. He was in the Jimmy Carter's administration, 76 to 80. And so after they got married, and I was born in Lexington, but we lived in New York for a number of years, and then moved to DC, which is where I grew up for most of high school and all of that. But the reason we got there was through his work in the Carter administration. So then after that, he did some consulting, but then he went into the banking industry and worked for American Express and then various iterations of American Express along the way. And then at the end of his career, he ran a division of Smith-Barney at the time called Peachtree Asset Management in Atlanta.
I'll never forget the first time I saw your father, and it really was like a movie. And it just happened to be a very wide hallway, and I think we were at probably a men's club or at a golf club or something.
Yeah, maybe.
And then, but it was so epic. And then it was like a big wide hallway. And then, and then there was like these mahogany walls. And then he comes walking down, and it was almost like a theme song was playing. He was like, oh. I was like, look at that brother. I was like,
yeah. Oh yeah, I mean that's the thing about my dad. Let me tell you, he was a very big personality. So he literally took a lot of the air out of a room when he walked in, just as you described, right? Because he just had a presence like that, and he owned it and he lived it, and it was great because it was like like to your point, I always remember I could even feel my dad coming before I saw him. Like I just could be like, oh, okay, he must be around here somewhere because I feel him coming in, right? He just had that kind of presence that exuded that kind of like confidence and charisma, which was great.
Mm-hmm. It is. And this is a unfair extrapolation, but I'm still gonna ask.
That's okay.
If he was alive right now, what do you think that he would say about what's happening right now? What do you think?
Oh my gosh, he would have so much to say. I think he was very passionate about social justice. He was very passionate about civil rights and the fight for that. He was involved in SNCC in college, and he fought for the overall betterment, I think, of our race, and around not only civil rights, but around financial independence, so many areas that we still have work to do in. I think the one thing he would be excited about, though, is the fact that this feels like another movement happening where progress can get made, because he was all about making change and getting things done, right? And whenever he was in a position, he would always make sure he could help the cause, help Black people, help the cause of Black people wherever he was. So when he was getting out of office in the Carter administration, you have your administrative budgets, right? And I mean, I can remember, even as a little girl, I can remember him calling people like, man, I'm giving out money. So I got X amount left. What you need? Like, I'm giving out money. And there was a book actually that talked about him. It was actually a book about Jesse Jackson, I want to say, because he worked in Jesse Jackson's first presidential campaign in '84. I have it back here somewhere. I don't know where it is right now, but I think the book was called Shakedown, and it was written by this guy about how corrupt Jesse Jackson was. But in the book, he was mentioning how, my father was affiliated with him, and he actually did have to go and testify to Congress about, but it was well within his right to give out money for national programs because that was his job, right? And so people had these legitimate national programs. They just happened to be for the cause of Black organizations. So one of them was IFESH, Reverend Sullivan, that International Foundation for Education and Self-Help in Philadelphia. That was one. That was a big one that I know he supported quite a bit. So anyway, in summary, I guess I would say he would be very proud of all of us, and especially of Grace and Sarah and Ash and Shemayim, you know, for all of how smart they are and how strong they are and how they are the future. And he would be very proud to see them as the future.
Yeah, I agree. That's cool. What about you, Pop?
What lessons did your father teach you that are still instilled in you and that you find yourself teaching to your children?
You know, there's so many. I mean, I feel like it's really how I walk every day as a parent, by all the things that were taught to me. And I think one of them that I say to them every day is how they need to stick together. Mm-hmm. My father always told Charlie and I, my younger brother, Charlie, that, you know, like, you guys are the closest in DNA, in blood, and everything to each other than you are to me and your mom. So you all need to be tight, and you need to stay tight. And I tell my girls that all the time, because, you know, when you need something, when you need someone, they need to be your first call. So that was one thing. I think the other one, just like maybe more general, just to life, is just don't be afraid. And I'm still trying to master this, but don't be afraid to fail. You know, he would always encourage me to do whatever crazy idea that I had, not because he thought I could do it, but because he didn't want it to stop me from doing it just because I was afraid of it. And so I think that's probably the most important lesson that he taught me that I'm still working on. But I think it's been the most important one because it's kind of helped me continue to, like, put one step in front of the other, even though I'm afraid, in many different situations in my life.
Thank you.
It was funny. I remember having a conversation with my father, and I was doing one of my many things because we know I like to do.
Yep.
And I remember I had this, you know, and I'm only going to share it. I don't know why this came, but I had this, I think it's when we were in business school, but one of the other, I had this condom business, don't I? So I had this condom business that I would, it's just like,
I was like, what are we talking about?
Profitable, man. And I would put it up in these like these truck stops. And so one day, and I didn't tell my dad about it. I didn't tell him I bought this thing. One day I opened the trunk of my car, and he's like, what the? And I was like,
oh my God.
And then I told him, and for him, he didn't have the opportunity to gamble, not in career. You know, he just kept, he said, boom, boom. And so then he was like, and at first he got mad, and then he was like, where do you go and put these? And da-da. So then he's like, let me go one time, right?
Oh, no. Wow.
So I take him with me, and we go, and then I remember him in a very similar, and then he was like, I don't know about all the stuff that you do, like, you know, on top of the other stuff. But he said, he was like, please continue
Yep.
those few things as much as you can, you know, participate in some form of risk. And because he was like, I never got, I didn't have that opportunity. So in that same way, hearing your father, and I can hear your father, you know, he had that husky sort of whisper, you know.
Yeah.
So, Courtney.
Yeah, I know. Oh, I know. And he loved all my friends, you know. He enjoyed spending time with me and my friends because I think again, he was looking at the future and how we all view the world. And he was such a, he was such like a lifelong learner. Like he really loved to just research and find out the most obscure things. Like if you mentioned to him, like, and, you know, I didn't do as many like career iterations as you did, but, you know, I definitely have my moments where I would be like, I'm on this, like, you know, I'm on this fix, right? Like I'm going to be a fashion designer, because that was kind of my original thought, right? So he starts researching all this stuff about fashion design and, I mean, just designers, and sending me stuff. And this was back when, you know, we had fax machines. So he would fax me these documents about that. You know, then later in life, I worked for a computer software company, SAP, and I mentioned to him that I might, never even did it, but that I might have to go and work in South America. And I got a book of South America. I got all these books and paper. I didn't even end up going, but I'm like, the fact that I just mentioned it, he's like, okay, well, I'm gonna learn everything about it, and, you know, tell you so you know everything about it, or whatever. You know, somebody would say to him, I don't know, I have a turtle that, you know, I found, whatever. Oh, what kind of turtle was it? And so he'd be like, oh, let me find books on turtles. Like, I'm like, why do you care about turtles? But it was his, like, his, that's the way his mind works. He just always wanted to learn more. And he was interested in what other people were interested in. And he'd always want to know why they were so interested in that. Like, why did you want to be a chef, Courtney? Why, you know, what led you to that? Like, he'd be a great interviewer, actually, because he loved to hear about, like, everyone's kind of inner workings. And people were just so fascinating to him. So yeah, did I answer your question? I think I did.
No, you absolutely did, because, you know, I mean, you know, that's what fascinates me the most. You know how much I love people. So
exactly.
One of the things that I also remember is, and I'll be curious to hear your thoughts around that. One of the things that I also remember is the way that he would look at you. And when you all would cover, because, you know, you would, like, you know, we would be going somewhere and you're like, I got to go meet my dad. He tells me I got to go do X, Y, and Z. So then,
Yeah.
And then as the friend, you're just sort of standing there like this, waiting for whatever the transaction was. But he would stand there and he would look at you, and he didn't smile a lot. He, you know, in these interactions, but he would look at you with this intensity and respect, that whatever it was that he was saying to you, he knew that you were going to execute it. And that was beautiful to see. Because I love people, I watch everybody, but you already know that about. So, you see some parents and they're looking and they're like, are ya? Is it good?
Right.
That was the way, that is like one of my memories, one of the way that he would interact with you, which I thought was always just phenomenal. It was very rock solid. And I loved that. It may not be how you felt on the receiving end.
I know. I'm like, I don't know the receiving end what that was, but I mean, I think it was probably two different things. Number one, like, he's probably like, all right, like, don't ask me for any more money after this, seriously. Like, this is it. That could have been one of them. But then I think, he always wanted to share with me, like, some, I don't know if you want to call it landmines, or I don't know, but just stuff to look out for, right? So maybe that kind of seriousness that you saw was something like that he was like, all right, now watch out, because so-and-so is doing this, and make sure that, you line yourself up to be over here or not over there. And whatever that was at the time, who knows? It could have been, I don't know, could have been some kind of politics happening at school. It could have been anything. It could have been some other family member that was going to call me with some crazy, I don't know. Like, it literally could have been anything. Yeah. But he was always very big on sharing, like, how do I, again, protect protect you against what I see that maybe you don't see. And probably some of that expression for me was that, you know, rebellion of that. Like, I know what I'm doing. Like, I can take care of myself. I don't always need you to step in, you know, at that stage of our relationship. But yeah, I do remember him always giving me some kind of, you know, I'll call it a warning or a heads up or whatever you want to call it, just to make sure that I knew this was around the corner, or something else that I needed to pay attention to.
That's phenomenal, though. That's beautiful.
It
Because
didn't feel, it
yeah,
felt different at the time, you know, because you're young and you're like, I don't really want to listen to my father. Like, I got this. I know what I'm doing, you know. But now looking back at some of those things he shared, I'm like, oh my God, like I never would have, you're right. I didn't know, right? And I did need that heads up. And now I am better trained to think about those things in my life, and I can share those with my girls who don't always listen to me either. So it just kind of keeps going.
Well, and then that also goes into, you know, at times you and I look at each other in a crowd, but it's also that ability to look down the path. A lot of people, they're brilliant, but they can't see the stones falling into place. And that kid is sitting there and saying, you're like, that looks like that's going to go sideways in about 5 seconds.
Exactly. Oh, man.
Do you have any other question? You don't? That's amazing. You normally always has any questions. Do you have any questions for us?
I just, let's see. I do actually have a couple of questions. So how many interviews have you done so far?
Wow.
14 or 15.
You said 14 or 15?
Yeah, 14 or 15.
So, like, I guess, what is the one thing that you feel like has been the most meaningful for the two of you doing this together, like over the course of doing these sessions?
The first thing
for me
is I learned quite a bit about my mother, and then I also learned interviewee. But also at the end, this kind of spoils it. But at the end, we always ask the person we interview to look into the camera and tell themselves and tell our listeners and tell the world that they love themselves. And so that's always my favorite part of the video.
The best part, yeah. That's cool.
One of the things that I learned that's fascinating about myself is because he's present with me. Like at first, when we first started it, I just wanted him to be able to express himself and, you know, ask. So, I was being very motherly. Right. As it moved along, Ash would start pulling these nuggets out and, you know, ask people very complicated questions. So then with that, I felt like my role changed. And so instead, my role got to change to be sort of more happy-go-lucky. When if he was not present, I would probably ask the same questions that he asked. But now, like, so
you don't. Right.
I allow myself to sort of wander and not focus on my words. I'm more focusing on the interviewee. Like it's allowed spirit that I'm not used to actually out of myself. And I've meditated on it. I was like, I like it, because most of the time I'm normally very much like this and I'm paying attention, but I'm not like that in his, because he's covering that. So then it's like I get to the other process. So that's been very fascinating to me, that development. I see that coming.
Oh, that's really cool, actually. And then I guess listening to just these segments about, you know, fathers, you know, what, for both of you, like what has it provoked you to think about differently about your dad?
You want me to go first? For me, I really wanted to do these because I just miss my dad so much. And I know what that means to you. And I know what that means the other, you know, dad girls that I interviewed. So
Yeah.
for me, it's been just a way to touch on another level and to just sort of amplify in a way all these great dads that are out there, you know, whether they're accomplished or not, but that
Yeah.
but that there are big little girls out there and little girls out there that really honor them and love them more than they think. So that part has been really neat for me. And because, you know, at this stage I've only interviewed people that I'm close to, but because I love you all so much, I love your father so much. So it's such an easy way to write about them and feel like I get to touch them again too, because they, you know, they were like, however short, you know, they were like a father to me. So that's what it means to me.
I know. Yeah, I know. It's bringing back memories of your dad for me, you know. And gosh, he was such a giant. I mean, to be short, he was still such a giant, right? And he had that presence. He had a presence that way as well, you know, despite his stature. But I mean, we're just so blessed to have had amazing dads. And I agree. I just, you know, I wanted to do this and share this with you all because how much I miss my dad and how much I love him and wish I could be with him right now. And, you know, it was interesting when you asked me about a picture and I was like, oh my God, I don't have a lot of great pictures. And I'm like, take pictures with your dad, Grace. Take pictures with your dad, Sarah. Like, do that. Create those memories. I mean, they're here. And I found some. And, of course, you know, I mentioned my challenge with keeping things, and Charlie has a lot of things. So I think Charlie will find some more. But in any event, it just made me remember how much to cherish relationships with people that are here while they're here and not take it for granted.
And, you know, and I really thought as the pandemic was, you know, moving along, I went back and forth on certain days, you know, and so one day I was just like, oh, you know, I want my parents, you know, there were several days I was like, I want my parents. And then on other days I was like, I'm so grateful that they're not here. I'm so grateful that I'm not having to worry about their health in this, you know, in this situation. So I went back and forth, but with all that murmuring under it, it's only brought even more of how much I miss them. So
yeah, I had the same thing. I'm just like, you know, because I see my friends having to check on their parents and, oh, they're doing this or they're not listening, they're going out even though they told them not to, or, you know, I mean, how do they arrange for stuff for them? And I'm like, on one sense, it's a relief that I don't have to worry about them, but, you know, I've even said to a couple of them, like, you have such an honor and a privilege right now that you get to do this for them, you know? So I agree. It's kind of like this back and forth emotion about it, but yeah, we didn't get to the stage of having to, for very long anyway, parent the parents that a lot of, I think, our friends are going through.
I agree.
For me, going through these interviews, talking about fathers and what they mean to the interviewees, has it's shown me how fortunate I've been to have a mother like my mother, but also to see how much I didn't realize what my father taught me, how long it stuck with me, and the things that he taught me stuck with me. My father has not been with me for a very long time. And I found myself trying to like look past it because I believe it's difficult for me. But when I think about it, wrong perspective, it's not. But once I start to really dawn on it, it hits me pretty hard. And so
Yeah.
seeing these men who care for their children or hearing stories about these men who were such great role models just makes me want to be the best father for my child. Even though
Yeah.
being, but on the same hand, I'm not so scared. So,
Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing that. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, there we go.
There we go.
Yeah, that's fascinating. All right. Well, there we go. You good? All right. I love you. All right. That's what these are about. It has been beautiful, you know, interviewing these men, and each one of them as they come across that screen. And some of them we know before and some of them we haven't. A few of them have been like mystery guys, like someone else recommended. And then they come through the screen, but they all zero in on Ash, and they all have something to offer him in every interview, which has been really beautiful. It's been really neat how they connect with him in a certain way, and then they're like, you know, keep going. So that part is phenomenal. Beyond the nugget, it is the whole reason for this. But you know, is that this is a community, and we just you know, we need our communities to sustain ourselves. So
absolutely, yeah, so true. And I mean, you know, what I'll say is, Ash, just kind of watching you today with your mom, you've got that presence too. And it's very powerful. And it's just amazing to me to see after, you know, watching you grow up. But yeah, you've got that presence. And thank you for doing this. I love both of you guys, and I just appreciate having this conversation.
thank you so much for sharing.
Yep. Thank you for your time on this Juneteenth.
I know.
If you would look in the camera and say, I love myself.
I love myself.
That's
Is that good?
It's so stupid. Somebody's going to watch all these like they're going to binge them, and they're going to be like, I've had enough.
What? Cut. I know. I'm like, what? Where's the camera? No. I've gotten a little better with that, but yeah, it's always a little tricky. So.
All right, Ash, you're on, man.
I love myself.
All right. I love myself. I love you very much, Agnes.
I love you too.
Love you too. Love you both. Mwah. Can't wait to see you in person and like give you a real hug. Like, that's going to be amazing. Finally.
All right, everyone. Thank you much for watching. Thank you for joining us again for another episode of Coming into Grace, presented by I Love Myself Fix, knowing who you are and loving us for it. See you soon.